In my 27th year, I am happily married to my wonderful wife. Despite our shared desire to have children, we have faced challenges along the way. On the advice of a fertility specialist, it was recommended that we undergo IVF as the best way to have biological children. We are now working hard to ensure that this process will bring the desired result. Our families are aware of the conception problems we are experiencing and our decision to resort to IVF. However, my sister Jane, who is 43, has expressed open disapproval of the move. She is convinced that my wife, having been adopted, should have considered adoption before any medical procedures. Jane argues that IVF is an unethical choice and suggests that it could have negative consequences for future children. Every time Jane starts talking about this topic, I try to intervene, urging her to keep her opinions to herself. She questions every decision we make to give up adoption and wonders what it would be like to choose a biological child over adoption, especially since my wife was adopted herself. My wife, despite my misgivings, decided to open up to Jane. She tried to explain that adoption, while a wonderful opportunity to bring joy to life, may not always be the ideal solution. My wife shared her feelings, describing how she had felt alienated all her life, not like the rest of her family who boasted similarities to other relatives. This sense of difference, she said, put pressure on her. She mentioned that despite the love and support from her foster parents and siblings, within the extended family, she always felt like an adopted child, someone who was not really their blood child. My wife shared with me how both of her biological parents refused to communicate when she tried to contact them. This experience left her with a desire to make the genetic connection to her own family that she had been striving to create. She explained to Jane that such a connection was possible but would require a financial outlay. At the same time, my wife acknowledged that she could adopt a child if that was her only option. Jane's reaction was sharp and hurtful. She accused my wife of selfishness and expressed that such views were unacceptable. After this conversation, my wife was deeply upset. A few days later, Jane called me, suggesting that we discuss how my wife could fix her thinking. These words from my sister caused me frustration and anger. I responded to Jane by highlighting her hypocrisy, remembering that she too had resorted to adoption when assisted reproduction and IVF methods failed. I pointed out that we had never judged her for her family-building methods, but I found her hostility towards our choices unacceptable. I expressed my opinion that such behavior was undignified. Jane responded by accusing me of not having the right to point out her infertility issues and abruptly ended the conversation by calling me an idiot. You're definitely not an idiot. Your sister's attacks on your wife could probably stem from feelings of jealousy and resentment over her own inability to have biological children. If you and your wife have a biological child, these feelings may intensify. Your sister seems to feel frustrated because she can't get what she wants and believes that no one else should achieve it in any other way than the way she has taken. This behavior indicates that her anger and criticism are more a reflection of internal problems rather than really about you or your wife. Clearly, her words and actions carry more information about herself than about your situation. Her unwillingness to reconsider her position, even after your wife has courageously presented her arguments, reveals a lack of empathy and understanding. The fact that you stopped communicating with Jane a long time ago speaks volumes. Her behavior, which can only be described as self-righteous, and her desire to impose her beliefs on others only underscores her isolation from family values and understanding. Her categorical nature and inability to accept your choices emphasize her internal conflicts and dissatisfaction. Your words ask an important question about the need to keep someone in your life who brings so much negativity and toxicity. You hint at the possibility that life can be better without this heaviness, indicating a desire for healthy and supportive family relationships. Next story. My sensitivity to sound makes sleep easy and fragile. Even a slight noise interrupts my rest momentarily, after which I have to return to the embrace of sleep for a long and painful time. My husband, who is familiar with this feature of my sleep, has become an unwitting source of anxiety lately. His late homecoming and bedtime preparations invariably take me out of my resting state. I have repeatedly offered him the alternative of sleeping in another room if he returns after midnight, but recently he has refused to submit to this arrangement. In protest and hoping for understanding, I decided to lock the bedroom door, giving him advance notice of my intention. I thought this would make him realize my determination and encourage him to find a compromise. When he discovered that the door was locked, his persistent knocking woke me up, but I chose not to respond, pretending not to hear him. He tried to get through, claiming to know I was awake and demanding to be let in. Eventually, without success, he retired to the guest room to sleep. The next morning, tension hovered between us. My husband suggested removing the bedroom lock as a solution to our conflict. I avoided the argument, seeing his irritation, but when he asked if I had anything to say, my silence only increased his anger. He demanded an apology, to which I refused, believing my actions were justified. This caused him to leave the room in disagreement, and I did not stop him, realizing that he was still under the power of resentment. In these moments, I feel at an impasse, realizing that our situation requires flexibility and understanding on both sides. My husband, while spending time with friends and family, might seek to come home early to avoid nightly disagreements, but a solution to this issue remains elusive. Your attempts to find a solution to keep things quiet at night do not make you unreasonable. You have suggested alternatives, such as offering your husband another room to sleep in, which he has rejected. Your warning that the door would be locked when he returned late was a clear expression of established boundaries, which is a healthy approach to conflict resolution. However, his ignoring your requests and subsequent actions indicate the need for a deeper dialogue between you to find a mutually acceptable solution, such as your decision to sleep in another room. Your husband's lack of concern for your feelings is concerning and emphasizes the importance of mutual understanding in a relationship. It may be worth waiting until after midnight to see if his behavior changes, and if not, use the guest room as a temporary solution. It is important to come to the realization that relationships require give and take, and both partners need to feel heard and respected. This situation raises questions about mutual respect and the need to set clear boundaries in the relationship. It is important to discuss this together to find a long-term solution that satisfies both parties. Your right to uninterrupted and restful sleep is fundamental and must be respected. If communication is not leading to change, this may indicate deeper problems in the relationship that need attention and possibly additional support. Now I want to tell a different story. I'm not sure where to begin. On reflection, last night one of the most famous fraternities on campus threw a party on the beach themed around Christmas. There were tons of girls in bikinis, decorated in an ambiguous Christmas style around the bar. My roommate had recently broken up with a girl named Sydney, who was rumored to have unorthodox behavior. At about 2 in the morning, he burst into the room in the company of Sydney and her friend, both dressed in elf costumes, blatantly showing off their skin. Sydney then secluded herself in her room and didn't come out of there while I was engrossed in a game of Fortnite. Her friend, who introduced herself as a driver, found herself stranded and asked me to charge her phone to make sure Sydney was well. I agreed, and after a while she expressed her discomfort at being here and asked to borrow sweatpants since she was cold. I refused, but offered at least a blanket I found in my neighbor's room. It turned out to be too small, but it was the best I could offer. In the morning, my older sister came to pick me up, and seeing the sleeping girl on the couch, harshly condemned me for my failure to show kindness and care. My friend and I may well have offered her sweatpants. I could have let her sleep in my bed for the night and settled on the couch myself. Or I could have offered to drive her and Sydney home. Instead, I made the mistake of leaving an obviously well-meaning girl in a difficult position, indifferent to her situation. My sister stated that I should grow up, learn friendship and empathy if I wanted to elicit sympathy from others, including girls. She emphasized that I had missed an important lesson in treating people well that could have led to an appreciative response. When we got home, Sydney and her friend had already left, leaving a thank you note on the door apologizing for the odd behavior and asking me to say hi. My sister saw this as further confirmation of my inept social behavioral strategies and that I was behaving inappropriately. She believes that my behavior is the reason I never had a girlfriend and urged me to apologize to her on Monday, offer to buy her lunch, and try to strike up a friendly conversation. I also sought out other people's opinions on the matter, recognizing my mistake. You behaved rashly and judged without basis. It's interesting to note that you mentioned a beach party where all the girls were in bikinis. However, only Sydney and her friend who was acting as the driver were criticized by you for their appearance, despite the fact that the same attire was worn by everyone else present. Your sister rightly pointed out your inattention and inability to behave like a gentleman. That said, the girl didn't ask for anything excessive, just athletic pants to keep warm. While no one is obligated to help, it is not a good character trait to refuse help for selfish reasons. Your willingness to help could be a valuable lesson for the future. The girl who stayed to make sure her drunken friend was safe showed exceptional loyalty and deserves respect for such an act. She set an example of true friendship that many would want to look up to. Everyone around you seems to agree that your actions were rash. Anyone who values integrity, empathy, and common sense would say that you didn't do the best thing. It is important to strive for the best in yourself and your relationships with others. This case was a clear reminder of the importance of small acts of kindness. And maybe when you need support yourself, you'll encounter a situation that shows how important it is to be responsive and kind so that no one else feels like they're in the same position this girl found themselves in. Update: I met Natalie this morning. She treated my apology with the utmost kindness and expressed regret for bothering me on Friday. Natalie tends to talk a lot, which usually annoys me, but I felt comfortable in her company. We found ourselves sharing a common break between classes and spent about 20 minutes talking. She did most of the talking and I only nodded in agreement. When it was time to part, Natalie remarked that she was glad we had dialogue, even though I hadn't said much. I decided to go out of my usual way and kept the conversation going. She expressed a desire to meet again, and I agreed. My next story. I recently entered into a marriage with my sweetheart. Our history goes back almost 2 years. She has a baby girl in her life, also barely 2 years old, born of another relationship. The photos of our wedding, which took place in September, do not include the figure of the baby girl's biological father. At that time, the baby girl was just a toddler. We planned for her to be our temporary angel at the ceremony. It was decided that her regular nanny would stay with her during the celebration and take her home after it was over. However, once the celebration started, the girl had a nervous breakdown and only wanted to be with her mom. My wife ended up holding her in her arms throughout the ceremony. Due to her hunger and irritation during the ceremony, my spouse tried to hand her over to the nanny to soothe and feed her. But when that proved impossible, she continued to hold her daughter while she ate dry cereal straight from the Ziploc bag at our wedding. The little one stayed with my wife throughout the reception. Upon receiving the photos from the reception, I discovered that many of them captured the moment of the baby eating the cereal while sitting on my wife's lap. I suggested that my wife edit the photos a bit in Photoshop to visually recreate the wedding plans as we had envisioned them. However, my wife thought the photos with our daughter were adorable and wanted to leave them as is, claiming she didn't see the point of editing. I explained that I had dreamed of a more elegant visualization of wedding moments, and having a child eating cereal out of a Ziploc bag didn't seem quite right to me. Now my spouse is upset because she felt I was seeking to somehow erase the image of her daughter from her memory. I am currently in her daughter's room reflecting on what has happened. The desire to give wedding photos a kind of fantasy idealization may seem unusual, especially when the reality differs from expectations. After all, a wedding is an event where things don't always go according to a predetermined plan. Perhaps what is unique about your situation is that the most important moments were those involving the presence of a young child who is now part of your family. Embracing these moments with a smile and humor can add special value to your memories. I share the idea that having a stepdaughter at key moments in the creation of a new family adds exceptional warmth and immediacy. Your spouse's emotion in seeking to preserve these moments intact reflects a desire to appreciate the true essence of family bonding. These moments become priceless family memories, emphasizing that creating a family is not just about you and your wife, but also about those moments of interaction that form you as a family. While sympathizing with your desire to create the perfect image is understandable, life realities often include moments that we didn't plan for, but that make our shared experience richer. Your choice to marry a woman with a child involves accepting and appreciating all aspects of this new life, including the unexpected and often chaotic moments. As a compromise, offering to organize a separate romantic photo shoot for you and your wife sounds like a great idea. Such photos will be a complement to the natural wedding shots, reflecting the reality of the day. This will keep a balance between your desire to have images that meet your vision of the perfect day and the importance of recognizing those imperfect but sincere moments that make your wedding truly unique. Thus, there is no need to exclude your stepdaughter or any real moments from your wedding memories. Rather, you are looking for a way to complement those memories by creating additional images that also reflect your love and commitment to each other on this meaningful day. A story that really surprised me. In my family, I am now 16 years old and my younger brother is 7. Despite repeated reminders from our parents, my father is 47 and my mother is 44. My brother continues to leave his toys in our front yard. This careless behavior led to an unpleasant incident recently when my dog swallowed part of a Lego toy. Because of this, we had to go to the vet for endoscopic removal, which cost us a large sum of money. This dog I consider mine, as I was the one who convinced my parents to get one when I was 10 years old. Since then, I have always taken responsibility for her care, although my parents of course paid for her food and the standard trips to the vet. Now that I work part-time and have a small income, I offered to help my parents with the cost of an unexpectedly expensive procedure. My mother had recently started her own business, which entailed a significant financial investment, so I knew our family wasn't in the best financial position. Offering to help was my way of supporting them. While the dog was in the hospital, I gave my brother a stern and clear warning in front of my parents. If I saw his toys in the yard again, I would throw them away. I gave him 2 weeks to think about it. However, despite my warning, he left his Lego in the street again. I fulfilled my promise. When my parents found out, they were not happy with my actions. I reminded them that I had warned them of the consequences in their presence, and they did not intervene. They may have thought that I would not dare to take such a step. Now my brother is acting as if a major tragedy has occurred, and I find myself in the role of the guilty party. In this situation, accusations can be directed at anyone. Your little brother may not be able to forgive you. I recognize the reasons for your irritation. It can be difficult for a teenager to understand the immaturity of younger children. When you gave the ultimatum, your parents should have seriously considered the consequences and discussed them with you. Imagine if your words had sounded even more stern. Your actions, though seem rash to me, suggested a different approach. Perhaps it would have been better to hide the toys and deny finding them. When your brother realized the significance of his actions, it doesn't compare to the importance of the life of a pet that could have been the subject of arrangements with the parents. Thus, you could offer an option to return the toys. Throwing the toys away seems to me to be an unwise solution. Selling them to cover veterinary expenses would be a more thoughtful approach. The issue is not punishing the brother, but ensuring the dog's safety after a serious and costly incident. The parent's failure to act, despite the warning, begs the question. You made your intentions known in the presence of the parents, and they expressed no objection. It could therefore be assumed that you were acting with their consent.